Okay, hello and welcome, people. Welcome to Green Tea Guru. Today, we'll be talking about cheap tea. Is it worth it? Does it taste nice? Should you bother buying it? So, really, this is kind of a educational video, I believe. I'm just trying to go through and explain a few of the pitfalls that I fell in when I first started getting into tea properly. I mean, cheap tea is quite alluring for the main reason that it's cheap. And, if you're approaching loose tea with the mentality that all tea is a commodity and therefore I want the cheapest that I can get, you're going to find a lot of this cheap tea around. And in most cases, and I'm saying most cases, cheap tea is cheap for a reason. Okay, so I've touched on quite a few points there. Let's start with the mentality. Cheap tea is a commodity. Well, yes, it is a commodity. You shouldn't think of it like that. For example, if you're out there to get some Long Gin or Dragon Well green tea, don't always assume that all the Long Gin green tea on the market is all the same and therefore I should get the cheapest one. Okay, there are different grades of which comes into processing, the area it was grown in, etc., which will define its price. And I can assure you that a cheap version of Dragon Well tea, comparing it to a more expensive version which might cost double, triple the price, or even more, there will be leaps and bounds between the taste, the processing that went into the tea, and potentially the health aspect of the tea you're drinking. Okay, the first two are very easy to understand. The third one, the health aspect. Cheap tea is generally made quite industrially. So, if they're going to make this tea cheap, they're going to knock it out quick. They're going to make it quick. And when they're making the tea quick, they might be making it on an industrial scale, using potentially lots of nasty chemicals to make the tea. And in this day and age, it's very hard to distinguish which teas have been made unhealthily for the drinker and which teas haven't been. It's getting better, and I will touch on this on a video later on, but just want to make you aware of it now. So let's take this idea to another section of tea, Puerh. It's the same thing with Puerh tea. For example, in the Western world, a cheap version of Puerh tea, let's say for 100 grams, probably going to cost you around £5. So that's around $8.50? No, yeah, about $8, something like that. That's there's reasons for the price of this tea. It's going to be probably very new, so a year old or a couple of years old, something like that. It's most likely going to be made from a big manufacturer, which isn't necessarily an issue. The Mengai Tea Factory or Shaguan make some very good teas at a very reasonable price. But when you're looking at these more expensive teas that are maybe a year or two old, they're going to be a lot more expensive and anywhere in between. And the reasons for that is again, where the tea is from. They might be from areas that are much more prestigious than these big tea companies do. They may come from tea trees that the big tea companies can't or won't use. For example, wild tree or ancient arbor, trees that are 1, 2, 3, 400 years old. They may be put through a much higher level of processing than these big companies can or will do. The other important thing you need to note about buying cheaper Puerh tea is if it looks really cheap for what it is, most likely it isn't what it is. If you're buying from somewhere unscrupulous, potentially, just use your head. To be honest, if it's really cheap, it's most likely fake or the real deal, but not of the age they say it is. There's a lot of trickery going on out there, and just need to be aware of that. So please don't have the mentality that you're just going to try cheap, and if you don't like it, walk away from that particular tea, because I can assure you, look a bit more down the track and you'll find better teas. For example, there's a lot of people trying ripe Puerh. They try a very, very cheap one and it doesn't taste nice. And they assume the whole tea genre of ripe Puerh is not nice. And that's the really sad thing, because if they just tried a good tea from a good vendor, and it doesn't necessarily have to be really expensive, just a good one from the Mengai factory from a good vendor, for example, it sets you on the track. And these bad teas out there can make people turn their back from a whole world of teas which they can explore. So, keeping in mind everything I've just mentioned, I'm going to talk about a few teas that I can suggest to people if they want to get some cheap teas that do taste really good. So, one for me, which I think is really hard to find a bad version of, is Taiwanese milk oolong. Taiwanese milk oolong. It's not that expensive, and it just tastes so light, refreshing, and slightly milky, hence the taste, and just really lovely and sweet. You can't really get bad versions of that tea. Well, I haven't tasted one. The only thing to mention with that tea is that it has, when it's been made, for example, if it's spring harvest and you're buying it in April or May, June, it's going to taste good. But, after about 3 or 4 months, it doesn't taste bad, just the flavour is muted. So, if you're buying 2015 spring harvest milk oolong tea and it's November, December, chances are it's not going to taste, you're not going to get that amazing fresh experience that it would have tasted like a few months before, regardless of how it's been kept or how it's packaged. With green teas, there are a lot of green teas out there that are good bang per buck teas. One of them I'd suggest is Mayo Feng. But in actual fact, there are loads of green teas that are pretty good and pretty well priced. So you just got to take your choice and take your pick. You'll find some good ones in there. White tea. Most people go for white peony. But I've got to be honest and say that I personally don't like the cheap versions of white peony. The more expensive ones are very good. The cheaper ones, they just got this weird sort of processing-y sort of taste, which I don't like. I do a good Bailu Chun, a white version of Bailu Chun on the site. That's a very good tea and very inexpensive. That's a good one. Ripe pu'er. In fact, I'm going to do ripe and raw pu'er together. If you want to start out and you want something cheap, Mengai Tea Factory. It's the way to go. Get a cheap version of ripe pu'er from Mengai Tea Factory. You can't go wrong. Get a little tu'a cha, a little 100-gram cake of raw or ripe, and they're both going to be very good. Very good. In fact, Mengai Tea Factory are extremely famous for their ripe pu'er, and so they should be, because they do a very good job. The raw pu'er is good. It's basic. It's nothing that's going to blow you away, but it's going to give you an idea as to what it's all about. When you start to step up on the raw pu'er and go for more interesting, expensive cakes, you're going to find much more complexity going on. But as a starting point, Mengai Tea Factory. With black teas, they're not very expensive anyway, to be honest. I would start mid-range. Okay, so, mid-range and up. The lower ones are okay, but, go mid-range and up. Oolongs, I've already told you about the milk oolong. Jade, Taiwanese oolong is good. But, don't stop there, because you're really missing out on some extremely interesting, great teas. Specifically, bug-bitten oolong. And some high mountain teas. Just extraordinary experience. Well, thanks for stopping by. I appreciate you've listened to my voice for so long. It's been Ollie from greenteaguru.co.uk, and you can purchase many teas from my website, greenteaguru.co.uk. Until next time, happy cupping.